Then we'll turn over to our presenters. My wife will help me with the singing. As a matter of fact, she'll be doing it alone.
Hello everyone, happy Sabbath. Okay, we'll just do one hymn and then we can get started. Hymn number 88, I believe. Okay, let's Sing the Wondrous Love of Jesus. Okay, let's just do hymn number 15. Yes. Okay. My Maker and my King. My Maker and my King, to thee my all I owe. Thy sovereign bounty is the spring whence all my blessings flow. Thy sovereign bounty is the spring whence all my blessings flow. The creature of thy hand, on thee alone I live. My God, thy benefits demand more praise than I can give. My God, thy benefits demand more praise than I can give. Lord, what can I impart when all is thine before? Thy love demands a thankful heart, a gift, a lust, a pour. Thy love demands a thankful heart, a gift, a lust, a pour. Oh, let thy grace inspire my soul with strength divine. Let every word and each desire and all my days be thine. Let every word and each desire and all my days be thine. Amen.
All right. All right, so this afternoon we are privileged to have with us Sister Myra Rodriguez and Dr. Serge Thies, who will be our presenters for this afternoon. Welcome to those parents who have just arrived as well. I know that there are still more on the way, but we do need to get started. Our first presenter this afternoon is Sister Myra Rodriguez. She has more than 45 years of experience being an associate superintendent in the Florida Conference, and she's also been a school psychologist. So she works with all our schools within the Florida Conference, but works particularly closely with West Palm Beach Junior Academy. She's actually our school nurturer. So she serves on our school board. She's the one who I call when I have difficult questions, when I need advice, and she's always there with her wealth of knowledge, able to advise even in the most precarious or difficult situations, she always has words of wisdom to share. She's particularly good with young people. I remember her visiting a couple of months ago and just speaking with some of our young people, and it was amazing to see how they opened up to her. I had to just surrender my office for essentially that entire afternoon as she kept meeting with student after student and just talking with them and just sharing with them and helping them. So I'm privileged. We are honored that you're here. We thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with here this afternoon. After Sister Mara Rodriguez presents, we're going to have a presentation from Dr. Thies as well, who will introduce subsequently, and then afterwards, we will open the floor up for questions and answers because we want this to be as beneficial to you as possible. If there's something that you've heard, if there are personal questions that you have, please let us know so that those can be responded to. So I now turn over to Sister Mara Rodriguez, and I ask that you give her your fullest attention.
Well, good evening, or I should say, yes, it's almost evening. It's so nice to be able to be here with you. I thought today is a day that I'm driving many miles. I started off today in Bradenton, and then I drove over here, and from here I'm headed to Orlando. So my car is going to be tired, just like me, by the time we reach there. What a beautiful singing voice you have, young lady. I really appreciated you leading out in that hymn. Your principal, Ms. Smith, asked me to come and speak with you. How many of you have adolescents or soon-to-be adolescents in your families? Okay, a few of you do. And those of you that are just starting out, tuck this information away because you will eventually have adolescents at home at some point in time. And so what I'd like to talk with you a little bit about is how parents can deal with your children when they become adolescents. Because I see a lot of parents that tell me, I knew this child perfectly well, and then they turned 13, and then they turned 14, and it seems like I don't know them at all. Where did my sweet child go? So this presentation is especially geared to help you to understand. We only got a short time, so I'm going to pretty much fly through certain portions of it. And if there's some that we don't finish, then maybe we can do it at another time. Okay, so help, my kid is an adolescent. What do I do now? Well, let's see. There we go. So a lot of parents, again, tell me, I don't understand my child. It's like we speak a different language, but what do I do now? When I used to communicate with my child just fine, and now it seems like when we try to communicate, we fight a lot, or he gives me an attitude, or I just don't understand who this human being is that suddenly turned different in my home. And when I talk to many children seem to say the same thing about their parent. My mom or my dad just don't get me, or they don't listen, or they don't really hear what I'm saying. So it seems like children and parents drift apart a little bit during adolescence. And so I'm here to kind of tell you a little bit of why, and hopefully offer some suggestions here. So what are some of the characteristics of adolescence? Well, first, this is the time of life where kids are beginning to think for themselves. During their childhood years, children take their cues from their parents. They learn how to think about things from what their parents tell them. And so when they hear things on the news, when they hear things that other people tell them. Most young children will look at their parents to see how mom or dad react to something before they make up their minds of what they should think about certain things. And so when they become adolescents, suddenly it's like their brains kick in, their frontal lobes kick in, and they begin to analyze things, think things through for themselves, and they don't always have the same opinion that their parents do. So they may have different opinions from that of their parents, and sometimes that is great consternation for mom and dad. They may no longer enjoy activities that they used to enjoy, like when they were younger. Maybe they may be into new things, or they may be interested in new things that they weren't interested in when they were younger, and they can become very passionate about those things. In many ways, this period of life, those hormones are flowing. Those hormonal changes happen pretty quickly. And so you very often have mood changes. There are some days when you're up on top of the world and, joyous, and then something will happen, or one of their friends will say something, and then suddenly they're into the pits of depression, and they're really unhappy. And so it seems like those moods are pretty big mood swings for many young people. Children at this age are idealistic. They have their whole world ahead of them. And so they think about the world in an idealistic fashion. You'll ask many times, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And kids will say, well, I want to be a football player, or I want to be, a doctor, or, so there are many different things that they might say that they want to be. But when you talk with them about actually how are you going to get there, or how are you going to realize those dreams, they have no idea. So we have to start talking with kids about what real life is like and what it takes in order to be able to make your dreams come true. Because of the fact that they're so idealistic, they can be easily misled. And I'm assuming that many of you have made the decision to have your young persons here in a Seventh-day Adventist Christian school. And let me tell you, this is one of the safest places where they can be. Because within about the last 5 years or so, our world has gone crazy. Haven't you noticed? Our world has literally gone crazy. And I firmly believe that we are so much closer to the second coming of Jesus now than ever before. And there is a whole world that's out there that is trying to take your child's mind completely away from the values that you would like for them to have long term. So when you think about the idealism that children possess, that idealism can be so easily misdirected by people that can make them think that things that are not true are true, just in a flash. So because they see themselves as never-ending, they see themselves as invincible, and so they sometimes will do dangerous things, or they don't think that something is dangerous. That's why sometimes they might be willing to experiment with dangerous substances. And in this day and age, please, parents, talk with your children about fentanyl. Talk with your children about how experimenting with the least drugs can literally kill you the first time that you try it. Don't make sure that you have those conversations with your adolescent, because this is the time of life. Because they consider themselves invincible, they will try a lot of different things when mom and dad aren't around. And so you might think, well, in Seventh-day Adventist circles, my child is protected, and that's generally true, but don't forget, Seventh-day Adventist circles is a microcosm of the larger society that is out there. And the larger society that is out there at this point in time is dangerous for our kids. It is just dangerous for our kids. So again, they take risks and so forth because they don't think that anything bad is going to happen to them. They have an increased interest in physical appearance. You know, kids that maybe weren't necessarily that interested before will now spend time in front of the mirror. You know, they may want to have their hair just right or their makeup just right and so forth because they're taking increased interest in what they look like. Sometimes they need to dress in a certain manner in order to be able to feel good about themselves. And again, this is the time of life when they're starting to wake up to the fact that they like somebody or that somebody might like them. And the whole world can revolve around that. Kids are energetic during this time. They work for a cause, you know, a cause that they believe in. And we want to make sure that they understand what really being a Christian and following Jesus is all about, because that can be the best cause that they can have throughout their lives. There's also an ability to learn complex concepts. Don't be afraid to talk with your child, with your adolescent child, about deep things, because this is the period of life that they'll surprise you. They can understand and think deeply about things that you may not think that they think that deeply about, you know. So this is the time of life where you want to ask kids what they think about things, you know. When you're watching the news at home, or when you're watching a movie together and something controversial comes up on the movie, ask them what they think about that. Ask them what they would do if they were in that situation. We want to have a lot of conversations with kids at this age, because conversations and so forth open up the lines of communication. And those lines of communication are so important for you to have during these adolescent years. Okay. So what is the primary task of adolescence? What is the task that children generally work to accomplish during this time? Well, the first and primary task of adolescence is to establish an identity. Kids begin to ask the questions, who am I? What's my purpose in life? Why am I here? Who do others think that I am? What am I good at? What's my purpose in life? Well, you know, and if they are being raised in Christian schools, they're probably going to be asking the question, well, what special thing does God want me to do with my life? And they don't always have the answers to those things right away. It takes a while for them to be able to do that. But they look to their friends. They look to other people that are important to them, because they don't establish an identity in isolation. They look to their friends to see, well, who do other people think that I am? What do other people think that I'm good at? And suddenly, the opinions of mom and dad aren't as important as their friends' opinions. Why? Because, again, they're in the process of establishing an identity and saying, well, this is who I am, you know, these are the things that I'm good at. These are the things that others think that I'm good at. And so they begin to establish their identity and how they see themselves through the eyes of a lot of people that are around them. This is the time also where they're expanding their social relationships. Now, I know that we as Adventist parents get really nervous when our kids leave 8th grade and they go to high school, especially in this day and age. they need to be very well grounded so that they, because if they get into a group of friends that are not good friends, they can lose their way. So I often tell parents, during this time of life, open your eyes, open your ears, make sure that you're hearing and listening to the kinds of conversations that your child is having, the kinds of things that your child is into. This is the time where you want to be more in tune with what's happening in their lives, in their daily lives, than you ever have before. Because they're away from you a good portion of the time, and especially if they start going into other schools that are not Adventist schools, they're going to be meeting a lot of people that will sometimes have different views about life than what your nuclear family has. So those expanding relationships can be a good thing. It can be a good thing, but it is also one of the things that you need to watch. And that you need to watch to make sure that your child isn't being bullied or isn't being, treated in a way that makes their self-esteem go downhill, because all of those things can contribute to having a really unhappy kid without necessarily parents knowing it. This is the time where kids reestablish their self-esteem. So in order for a young person to establish a healthy sense of self-esteem, they need to know that they are competent, okay? They need to feel a sense of competence. I will often say to parents, don't do everything for your child. Let them take on more and more responsibility. Why? Because as they become more responsible, they'll feel better about themselves. They'll see themselves as being a competent person. And so when they are competent, competence breeds healthy, positive self-esteem. Again, this is the time of heightened emotional responses. And so part of adolescence is they have to know that even when they're up or whether they're down, they must still perform responsibly. So whether they're feeling high or they're feeling low, that there are things that they can do about that. And so during adolescence, parents need to talk with their child a lot about how they react to things, what's an appropriate response to things, and what to do when they're in a situation where they're frustrated. Because this is their training ground and their preparation for how they're going to handle things as they become older and into the world of adulthood. Again, this is the time where they're developing values, where they're developing personal beliefs about things. They're asking questions about, the self-talk that they're saying to themselves. Who am I? A lot of kids during this time of life put themselves down. Oh, I'm no good at this, or I'm not that smart, or I'm not competent, and so forth. So talk a lot to your child about how to have healthy self-talk. Self-talk are the kinds of conversations that you have inside your head with yourself. They're basically your thoughts. And if you're in your thoughts, you're giving yourself negative messages, well, then those negative messages will eventually get you down all the time. So talk with your teenager about how to be able to counteract negative thoughts when they're thinking negatively about something. How to be able to sort of question themselves and say, well, is that true? Am I not smart? Well, what about when I did this or when I did that? So. Teach your kid how to be able to counteract those negative thoughts so that they can have much more positive thoughts along the way. And again, this is the time where they're getting ready for adulthood. So they are seeking autonomy. They are seeking to be able to make more and more of their decisions. And I tell parents, this is the time of life where kids are literally pulling away from you. They're pulling away from you because they're getting ready to be their own person and become an adult separate from mom and dad. Now, that process is sometimes painful. Sometimes it's more painful for parents than it is for the kids, because the kids are seeking to establish their autonomy. And but parents, we're so very afraid for them. We're very afraid of what could happen because we've lived a little longer and we know what life is all about. And so because we know what life is all about, we're afraid that as we allow them to go out there, that they're going to get hurt, that they're either going to get hurt emotionally or physically in some way. So as parents, we tend to want them to stick close. But the only problem is if we keep them very close, then they can't do what they need to do in order to grow up. So there's a fine dance and a fine balance between giving them enough rope, so that they can make those decisions that will lead them into adulthood, and when to rein it back in when you're seeing signs that they can't handle it. So it's a fine dance between responsibilities and privileges. Let's talk a little bit more about that. There we go. I said before, we want to, during this time, invite open communication. So you want to practice active listening. Your kids, when they talked with you, they don't necessarily want you to tell them what to do. Now, sometimes they might, sometimes they'll actively ask your opinion. Well, what should I do about this or that, mom or dad? But most of the time, they just want to have you listen to them and not necessarily tell them how they should solve something. So you can be your child's sounding board by just practice active listening and just kind of saying, well, wow, so what are you going to do about that? So how are you going to solve that problem? Not necessarily telling them how, because they will clam up if you begin to preach at them in one way or another. Don't force their sharing of feelings. They will share their feelings and tell you how they feel about things, sometimes when you don't want them to. But in many cases, they will tell you what they think, but they need to know that you're willing to listen. And in this time, we live such very busy lives that sometimes as parents, we don't often have the time to sit down and spend quality time with kids. When we spend quality time with our kids, they will let us into their world. They will let us into their world much more so because they know that we care and that we're interested. So set some quality time around so that, you can do things with your son or your daughters and so forth so that they feel like they can talk with us in a manner that is productive. Because we are so busy with work and we are so busy, running the rat race and doing the things that we must do in order to survive, sometimes family takes second place. And so we want to make sure that we have that quality time available. Even if it's just a little bit of quality time takes precedence over getting them things, So getting them the latest video game that they might want and so forth, that is secondary to being able to giving of yourself. Giving of yourself is something that they will never forget because you're making those memories that will stick with your child forever. Okay. Sometimes this is working and sometimes it's not. go. When you're talking with your child, using open-ended questions to stimulate conversations. As I said before, ask them what they think about things. Ask them what about their ideas, their beliefs. If you're watching a movie in which something controversial happens, ask them, well, what would you have done in that situation? If something like that happened to you, what would you do? And those kinds of situations stimulate a lot of thoughts or a lot of conversations that you wouldn't normally have with your child. Talk with them about a wide variety of topics so that when they do start going out there, they are prepared for life. So that people don't take advantage of them, because there's a whole world out there that wants to give them the wrong type of information. And the only way that your kids will know differently is if you talk with them. If you talk with them about why you believe what you do. Why do you believe in God? Why is it that you made the decisions at some point in time in your life to give your life to God? What was it that, did it make you happier? What was it about following this path that made you choose this path as opposed to a different path? Sometimes we don't have those conversations with kids, and then we wonder why they kind of take the church for granted. Because they're not sure of why we made those decisions. And then listen carefully before giving your opinion. Because again, your kids will talk with you if they think that you're listening, but reserve your opinion until you're fully listening to what they have to say, and ask them what they think first before you tell them what they should do or how they should behave. So again, talk about anything and everything. No topics should be off limits. Ask for their opinions on a wide variety of topics. And one very important thing during this time of life, kids need your affirmation. They need you to notice when they do something well. When they do something that shows you that they are moving forward, that they're becoming a little bit more responsible, that maybe, I saw that you took out the trash without being told, because that's your job in the family. You know what? That's a sign that you're growing up, because that's what adults do. Adults do responsible things. So whenever you see that your child is doing something that they are showing just a little glimmer of being able to say they're moving in the right direction, affirm them for those things. Don't take it for granted because children are like flowers. They will bloom and thrive with affirmations. And a lot of times, as parents, we don't tell them we tell them when they do things wrong, or we can mete out punishments, or we will sometimes, give them a piece of our mind when they're doing something that is inappropriate. But we don't always tell them when we're proud of them. We don't always tell them when they're doing something that shows us that they're growing up. So look for those opportunities. Parents, look for those opportunities when we can affirm them and say, you know what? I am proud of you. Look at what you did. Okay? Those affirmations, they build up their self-esteem, and they show the kids that they are growing into, the people that you want them to be. Affirm. Those affirmations need to be genuine. They need to be specific. They need to be told, specific things that you notice that they're doing well, so that they general, saying I'm proud of you without having a qualifier, it's sort of like too general. Kids want you to be specific when you're giving them affirmations about things. And remember, when you think about disciplining with love, you're constantly balancing consistency with love and affirmation. So being able to have enough responsibility and enough things that you can put barriers on, it's sort of like putting on the brakes and putting on, in a car, you have both an accelerator and a brake. And the accelerator helps your car to go, the brake helps your car to stop. With your child, it's sort of the same principle. You have to have a go pedal and a stop pedal, okay? And doing that dance between giving them the affirmation to let them go and let them do things and make decisions that they can make, and then bringing them back when you're thinking that it's too dangerous or that they're making some decisions that are harmful to them. So that dance is the kind of balance that parents play all during the adolescent years. One of the most effective things that I tell parents is tell your child that one of the things that you are looking at is you're looking at their ability to accept and handle responsibility, and that with those responsibilities, the more responsible they are, then the greater amount of privileges that you can give them, because responsibility and privileges go hand in hand. When they're showing you that they're responsible, then that means they can handle greater freedom and greater privileges. If they're showing you that they're not responsible, then you take some of those privileges or freedoms back. So it becomes a dance of, you show me that you can do this, then you can have that. So you're constantly doing that. One of the things that you don't want is to not allow your child to make decisions as they're going through adolescence. You need to be coaching them on how to make those decisions, but you need to be allowing them to make some of those decisions, because what you don't want is for a child to get to the ripe old age of 18 and to then say, okay, now start making decisions. I know of many children that whose parents have done that, and they go absolutely bonkers. When they go away to college, they've never been able to run their life before. And so then they, make all kinds of mistakes. So adolescence is the training ground before your child leaves home, before they go out into the world. That's the time that you need to be allowing them to sometimes make good decisions and sometimes not so good decisions, and experience the consequences of the bad decisions that they make as you coach them through it. Because guess what? It's a whole lot better that they make those decisions when they're there under your roof and you can kind of keep an eye on exactly what's going on than letting, you making all of the decisions for your child, and then suddenly they turn 18 and they don't know how to do it, And finally, okay, either my eyes are getting harder, or I need better glasses, because that writing seems to be going very, very small. Okay, it's a little bit better over here. You want to, as much as possible, use natural consequences whenever possible, okay? Natural consequences teach children what they should do in a natural way. So, if your child isn't responsible enough to remember their lunch, you might bring their lunch once to school, but if it becomes a habit, maybe not having a lunch to eat is a natural consequence, so that they can remember to be able to grab it and bring it to school. if they're going to go somewhere, if something isn't life-threatening, if something isn't physically threatening or life-threatening to them, it's probably okay to allow children to experience the natural consequences of their choices. Because when they experience that, that's how we learn. Even as adults, that's how we learn. When natural consequences are dangerous or morally threatening, that's when we want to step in, so that, because we don't want our child to go in front of a moving car, for example, but otherwise, don't rescue them. That's probably what we're wanting to say. Don't rescue your child all the time, because parents who rescue their children grow up expecting for somebody to rescue them always. That's a child that doesn't know how to run their own lives. Focus on making responsible choices, and as they work through their way through life, when they make mistakes, you don't necessarily need to put them down for the mistakes that they make. You can just say, well, how would you do it differently next time? What lesson can we learn from here? Instead of doing it this way that didn't turn out so great, what do you think you would do if you had it to do over again? I tell parents you can do a replay button in a lot of different ways. So when your child maybe says something to you that is disrespectful, rather than getting into a great big battle, a great line that you can use is say, that's disrespectful. Do a replay. Try that again, because we want to give them many opportunities to do it right or to practice doing it right instead of scolding them for doing it wrong. Okay? Allow them to voice their opinions in a respectful manner, but don't allow rude or disrespectful behavior. So again, this is the time of life that your kids are allowed to be able to say, I don't agree with you, Mom, or I don't agree with you, Dad, and that you as a parent will want to say, well, tell me why. Tell me why you think as you do. Tell me what, because you are wanting, remember, to keep that line of communication open. The more you can swing that door of communication open, then you have an idea of what's going on inside your child's head. As long as they're expressing that opinion in a respectful manner. Now, when they cross that line into disrespect, then that's when you say, that's not acceptable, replay. You want to try that again. Ask that question again, or make that statement again in a more respectful manner. And there we go. When you're teaching them your values and the beliefs, again, tell them why you believe what you do. But don't force your values on them. Don't force your opinions on them, because they're going to develop their opinions. You need to show them why. And tell them the stories about your own life. Tell them why you've gotten to the conclusions that you have. And children are genuinely curious about that. They want to know their parents' stories. They want to know what made you believe the way that you do or think the way that you do. Teach them by example. Remember, it's not so much what you say, but what they watch you do that makes the biggest difference in their life. And then finally, don't attack their opinions or their beliefs, because that will put them completely on the defensive side. And you don't, the more defensive your children become, the more closed they are to your influence. This is the time of life during adolescence where you want to influence your children's thinking, but you can't command them to think that way. You have to influence it by doing a whole lot of talking and by doing a whole lot of listening to where they're coming from. And hopefully, if you do that, during this time, on the other end, as you begin as children end their road into adolescence and begin their road into young adulthood, the best gift that they can give you is to have an open, honest friendship where then your roles change, and instead of you being the parent, you can be their everlasting friend who will always be in their corner. Okay? Are there any questions, anything that I've said here that maybe has resonated with you? Anything that you think, well, she said that, what did she mean? Sure. Okay, I can wait. It's okay. I can wait. Are you sure? Okay, very good.
All right, so thank you, Mara. Thank you, Sister Mara, for presenting on the psychological aspect of teenagers. Okay, thank you. We are going to have some questions and answers afterwards. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, or if you want to get specific counsel as to how to deal with particular situations, you want clarity on something that was said, we will allow for that to be done afterwards. I'm going to invite Dr. Thies to come and speak to us now. Dr. Thies is a pediatrician and is an adult and child psychiatrist. So for context, a psychologist, as opposed to a psychiatrist is more on the medical. He can prescribe medication and so forth. A psychologist does not do that. A psychologist counsels, but on the more medical side, that would be where Dr. Thies comes in. He was formerly the medical director and chairman of psychiatry at JFK Medical Center. He's now a director of psychiatry at Found Care and also has his own private practice. He comes to us with more than 40 years of experience also. So he comes with a wealth of knowledge. But most importantly, he's very godly, loves God, loves children. Both of our presenters do. So I just ask for you to give him your attention, and afterwards we will take all the questions that you have. I must add as well, I know that some of our parents here might not speak English as fluently as others do. Sister Myra speaks Spanish. Dr. Thies speaks Creole. So if you want to ask a question and you don't feel comfortable asking it in English, please don't let that be a hindrance. Please just ask your questions and we will do our best to answer those. So I'll turn over now to Dr. Thies.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Could we stand a little bit to stretch to can get the blood flowing in the brain? So great. Yes, perfect. So we can sit down now. Thank you. Dr. Rodriguez did a wonderful job really to present to you an overview of adolescent and adolescent development. She really gives you the basic work. Having children, it's not easy. Unfortunately, there is no school to teach us how to become great parents, right? There's no school. But the good thing is, most of us, maybe by the grace of God, most of us end up doing a good job. But raising children is not easy. From birth, when they start waking up every hour to ask for the breast, to ask for the bottle, to being terrible too, up to adolescent. Adolescent is basically from 13 to 18. However, we have adult people who still behave as adolescent. We have people 25, 30, they still behave as adolescent. I think the adolescent period is the most difficult period in the development of a child. So let me give you two concrete examples. I remember I bought a car, and I was talking to my adolescent son, And we were talking, and then I get to the car, and he was by the car. And he said, Dad, you can run, I can go faster than you. Let's go. So he wanted to run by foot, and me on a fast car, wanted he can beat the car. And this is the way the adolescents think. Okay? The adolescents think they can do extraordinary things, when in fact they can't. Another example is when I finished my residency in pediatrics and my residency in adult and child psychiatry in New York, Brooklyn, New York, for those of you who know New York. The governor of the state was starting a program, a pilot program. He wanted to put a pediatric clinic in every borough. He chooses one high school to do a pediatric clinic. So that was one of my first jobs after residency. I was the pediatrician there. So in a school called Wingate, this is where my wife graduated from, my wife in the back. And it's called Wingate High School. For those of you who have been in New York in the 80s, 90s, you know Wingate. Now it changed name. So to help you understand how the adolescent think, is this. They think, like Dr. Rodriguez said, they are invincible. Nothing can happen to them. This is why it makes it so difficult to raise an adolescent boys or girl. So you see them in the clinic. Some of them came with a venereal disease, a sexually transmitted disease called chlamydia. Right? So you treat them, you explain to them what they have to do, they need to abstain from sex, they need to use protection, whatever they need to do. You treat them, you explain to them the consequence of having this problem. Guess what? 2-3 months later, they come back again with the same thing. And they will tell you, it can happen to my friend, but not to me. This is the same thing like Dr. Ojo was trying to explain to you, even by talking to them, even for drugs. They say, oh, my friend can smoke marijuana. They can become crazy. We know marijuana can make adolescents crazy, can make them psychotic. So they can see it. They can, no, it can happen to her or to him. It won't happen to me. This is the way the adolescents think. They think they are invincible. Something very important I don't want to forget to tell you, how difficult it is to raise an adolescent. You heard of that diagnosis called schizophrenia. Schizo means split. Phrenia is like mind, brain. So I always joke about it. I always said the adolescent mind is like a schizophrenic mind. I always say that. So you know why? Part of the brain think he or she is invincible, can race a fast car, can beat a smart car. Part of their brain think can go to the moon, can go to Mars. They have those crazy ideas that they can do, right? And they believe it. And this is why us as parents, when you're trying to explain to them, no, honey, you cannot do this, they're not going to listen to you because they believe they can do it. So what happened, this is why I'm telling you to be very careful raising adolescents. Some parents get so frustrated with getting better than you, this is that old school, when they keep arguing with you. Some parents get so discouraged, what they do, they give up. You should never give up. That's what I said, that brain is divided in two, right? Part of the brain is acting crazy, that I know everything. You cannot stop me from doing this, right? The other part of the brain is telling the adolescent, oh yeah, I need the guidance. I need my parents to guide me. But they will never admit it to you, okay? This is why you need to be very careful never to give up on them. Even though they are telling you they don't need your help, they don't need your guidance, they do. And part of them is telling them they do, but they will never admit it to you. So this is why we have to be very, very, very careful. Now, I think we have learned a lot from Dr. Rodriguez about the basic, the way the adolescent think, the way we need to approach them, the way we need to treat them. So, Dr. Smith telling you she's a psychologist, I am a psychiatrist and a pediatrician, I'm the medical part. I am the more concrete part I'm going to address to you now. Now, as I said, from childhood, from a small child all the way to adulthood, you can have the same psychiatric diagnosis. Okay? So since today we are focusing only on adolescent, let me just focus on adolescent for you. So I explained to you how difficult it is towards the adolescent. I explained to you how hard it is. And Dr. Rodriguez explained to you how to approach them, not to preach to them. More you preach to them, less they listen. Oh, John, if you don't do this, I'm going to send you back to Guatemala. I'm going to send you back to Jamaica. I'm going to send you back to Haiti because you don't listen to me. I tell you to do this. You don't do this. This is what I'm going to do. First of all, you know you're not going to send them to Jamaica. You know you're not going to send them to Guatemala, to Jamaica, to Haiti, you know. Why telling them that? You always need to be honest with them to tell them what you can do. You tell John, put that remote there. That's it. This is the way you communicate. Very short. Dr. Rodriguez Evans talk about consistency. You don't say, put this remote there, and then you go, you do your stuff, and you turn back, it's still not done. John, I told you. Very short. So the shorter you make the command, right, better they understand. Do not preach to them. Do not give them a sermon. Then you are Seventh-day Adventist, you go to church on Sabbath, the pastor tell you about this, you learn that in AY. If you don't, no. Do not preach to them. You want to tell them something, you tell them that directly. In very, very short. Now, we know how to approach them. You know how to talk to them, how to communicate with them. You understand the brain, the mind of adolescent more or less. Now, let me try to go back to the medical part of it, okay? As I said, all the medical, the psychiatric diagnoses, almost all of them that you have in adult, you have them in children, in adolescent, okay? However, sometimes the presentation is different, okay? So let's try to go very quickly over the most common one. Let's say, for example, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, okay? You see this in children from, 5 to even adult. So the treatment is the same for ADHD. Anxiety is the same as an adult. You treat it the same way. You see the psychologists make the evaluation. They see not only the therapy would help, they think that child might need to see a psychiatrist. They refer to a psychiatrist who might or might not prescribe medication for anxiety. Depression, what we call major depression, is the same. Okay? So I remember when my teacher said the worst enemy of medicine is medical literature. because it's like every few years they change exactly to the opposite. I remember not too long ago, in the 1990s, when I started my fellowship in child and adolescent. So they used to say that the child does not get depressed, cannot get depressed. Okay? So they used to say, I don't know for those of you, when I'm talking to Seventh-day Adventist people, I don't restrain myself by using big words because I know we are very medically inclined. So, if you remember when you were in school, called the id, ego, superego, you remember this thing? So they used to say, because the child does not have what you call a formed ego, they cannot get depressed. That was in my textbook in the 1990s. But we know this is not true anymore. A child can get depressed, okay? Depression is a medical condition. Can I repeat it? Depression is a medical condition. It is not only psychological. It's a medical condition. I mean by that, the same way you have asthma, you have blood pressure, diabetes, any heart condition, those are medical conditions. Major depression is also a medical condition. This is why medication works. You get me? So to give you a very quick example, now we know when somebody develops diabetes, it's because there is a substance in the body called insulin that the pancreas produces that's not functioning properly, right? This is why somebody develops diabetes. Okay? Now, asthma, what's happened to asthma? Somebody gets exposed to something they might be allergic to. What's happened? There is a lot of cells in the blood, in the lungs, called the mast cell. So those mast cells release release epinephrine, a lot of substances that those mast cells release, and cause the bronchiole in the lung to constrict and give you asthmatic attack. Let's go back to depression. In the brain, you have a lot of substances called serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, GABA, that help you in your brain when you get faced with some type of symptoms, depression, and those substances help you to deal with it. And sometimes they don't work as they're supposed to, and the result is you present with depression that you cannot handle. So you see the point why it's a medical condition? Okay? So you don't need to lose your boyfriend. You don't have to lose your girlfriend, to lose your spouse, to have some financial difficulty, to get depressed. You don't need everything goes perfectly well. I see people in my office who are very rich, living in Palm Beach, successful children, very rich people, medically well, and they are depressed. They want to die. So when you start treating them, oh my God, I don't know if I could get my life back. So depression is a medical condition. Why I bring depression talking about adolescent is that adolescent can also get depressed. Okay? But the presentation in adult is different than in adolescent. Okay? The adult who is depressed, does not eat, problem with sleeping, get very sad and cry all the time, at work cannot perform work, and sometimes have what we call suicidal thoughts. They want to kill themselves. This is what you have for adult. What about adolescent? Sometimes when you're looking for those signs and symptoms in a depressed adolescent, if you are not trained as a child psychiatrist, you might not even know it. So the adolescent who is depressed sometimes can be giggling, smiling, and going to party. But the adolescent who is depressed, your beautiful child who always listens to you, not only, I'm not talking about the change that adolescent bring. I'm talking about the change, the symptom that depression brings to that adolescent. The adolescent girl or boy who are very polite, well respectful, guess what? Start talking back, being very disrespectful, become sexually promiscuous, start using drugs. And his or her schoolwork become like from A to F. And yet, when you see that child still smile like nothing happened. So this is why you have to be very careful dealing with an adolescent who suffer from depression. Sometimes part of it could be just the change in adolescent, because like Dr. Rodriguez explained to you, with the change of hormone, they have a little bit of mood swing, things like that. But the depression, because we deal with a lot of depression in adolescent, where they come very depressed to the point of even killing themselves like the adult do. But the symptoms of being withdrawn, not sleeping, not eating, crying, you might not see this. What you might see is irritability, talking back, disrespectful, doing drugs, get sexually promiscuous. That's what you might see in an adolescent. Okay? So this is why you have to be very, very, very careful dealing with an adolescent. The adolescent is, as I mentioned before, it's very difficult to deal with. They think they can save the world. They think when they are talking to the parents that, oh, you are old school. They think they know better. Now, how do you deal with a child like that? As I explained to you, people, you cannot give up on them. They will be very oppositional. They will be talking back to you. Do not give back to them. Now, sometimes, like Dr. Rodriguez said very clearly, sometimes you tell them what the truth is, and you spend time listening to them. Okay? But sometimes you have to negotiate with them. You have to bargain. It's like the GOP Congress people last week trying to get a speaker. Okay? Sometimes we have to bargain with them. Sometimes it's not, oh, no, this is not part of my culture. My culture, I don't care how old you are, I can still get the belt and whip you. I don't know if it works in Haiti, if it's working in Jamaica, or wherever we are, but, Dr. Rodriguez's training, my training, that does not work. You need to listen to them, you need to know what their concerns are, you need to really listen to them, and then sometimes a bargain. Why my curfew has to be 10 o'clock, Mom? Why cannot be 11? Why my curfew has to be 10? To be 9? Why cannot be 10? Sometimes to listen to them and to negotiate with them, you have to bargain. I'm not saying you have to do it all the time, but sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you have to be very firm. Do not be afraid, because as I said, sometimes they can frustrate you so much, you really want to give up. You cannot give up, because the other part of the brain is telling you, yes, Mom, yes, Dad, I need your advice, but they will never admit it to you. So I think we can stop here, and I will be able to answer any question you might have. It could be any question on pediatrics, psychiatry, adult, and even child psychiatry. Dr. Rodriguez can join me here, and we can answer every question that you have.
Well stated, Dr. Thies. By the way, I don't know if I've met you before, but I've heard a lot about you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, questions?
How do you talk to kids about drugs? And you mentioned talking to them about the latest forms of drugs, because you're an adult, you're old school.
The best thing that I know is helping, especially adolescents. They like to know the facts. So the best thing that you can do is give them the facts, as stated in journals, as stated in newspapers. Let them know that right now there is an epidemic that's crisscrossing our country that is literally killing thousands of kids, and that those kids some of them were experimenting for the very first time, and they wound up being dead. So with kids, it's not so much your opinion as it is present them with the facts. Here is what can happen to you, just like it happened to this kid and this kid and this kid and thousands of kids across America. So when they are confronted with facts, they generally respond to that.
Yeah, let me add, it's a very good question because it's very common. And it's not because we are here, we are Seventh-day Adventists, we think our kids are safe, they're not going to be using drugs. So we need to open and talk to them about it. So why it is so dangerous, Dr. Jugeson said that maybe because we know Jesus is coming quicker than we think. For example, I just came back, in May, I went, where was I? I think in New Orleans. I was in New Orleans in what you call the American Psychiatric Association, where I went to many lectures on the use of, very simple, marijuana. All the studies, those people are not Christian. Those are scientists, people from Yale, from Harvard, from UCLA, from doing research in teaching people about the use of marijuana, okay? None of those products that they get outside, they say that they are good, they are not good. There is no efficacy in them at all. The contrary, they make people crazy. Now, Dr. Tis, if it's so, why in Florida people can get what you call a marijuana card? Why people can do this? Can somebody answer that question for me? Money. They know all the other states are making money out of this. The other day I was upset. I don't know where I was, and I see something, physician prescribing marijuana. It's like an advertising. I said, my God. And when you look at it, none of the studies has proven any efficacy of those drugs. This is just a question of making money. Florida want to get into the pile and get money and get those marijuana cards, those things. It does not work. It does not work. I'm not telling you this as a Christian, Seventh-day Adventist Christian. I'm telling you that as a scientist, it does not work.
And over the years, we tend to think, because, when marijuana's been around for a long time, but the strands that they have now are so much more potent than what was around 20, 30, 40 years ago. Marijuana at this point is a gateway drug. The more the kids start engaging in it, then they go on and they graduate to bigger and better things.
Not only that, I remember my first private patient I have in New York. My first private patient was referred to my office from LIJ, Long Island Jewish Hospital in Long Island. They referred my first patient. That patient is the son of a very prominent medical school teacher, very prominent teacher. And they referred the son to me. He was so sick, get admitted like he's schizophrenic, hearing voices, this cow coming to him. He was so sick, even medication would not work. He had to receive shock treatment. And after shock treatment, put him on medication, was doing fine. But this patient was doing so well. But every time he touches marijuana, he becomes psychotic. So I'm talking about 1992, 93. At that time, I wanted to publish a paper on this. At that time, even in the medical literature, they were telling you marijuana does not cause psychosis. I go to conference, I raise my hand, ask question. No, it doesn't. But now, check the literature. Check. Marijuana is number one causing psychosis in adolescents. And I see them all the time at JFK. They become very crazy, psychotic, hearing voices, paranoid, just by using marijuana.
And the more that we know about this, and yet you ask, and this is an example of the type of world that we live in now, because more and more states are going into the bandwagon of passing laws to allow it for recreational use. So again, we're living in a dangerous world, in a world that is dangerous for your children. So if you talk with them about those things and confront them with facts, at least you would be sending them out in the world knowledgeable about those things. The worst thing that can happen is if you send your child out into the world and you've never talked with them about these things, because they will have friends that maybe they wouldn't do it on their own, but they were going to come up with friends who might invite them to partake in stuff like that. So you need to have had those conversations ahead of time so that when they find themselves in those circumstances, that conversation will come back and saying, what should you do in those circumstances? What, if you're at a party or, somebody slips you something and you don't know what to do, call me. I will not be mad at you. I will come pick you up. Call me no matter where you are. So those kinds of conversations that you have with your kids can save their life. Okay, remember that. It can save their life. Any other question?
Okay. He has a question. Yes. One second.
Sorry. Thank you. Doctors, can we prevent any way to prevent the anxiety in child, for example?
So can you prevent it?
Can we prevent?
It's a very good question. I really don't. What you're thinking when you said to prevent it, okay? Because anxiety can come from many different situations.
And there are some children that are more prone than others. We all experience stressors in life. It's part of the human condition to, all you have to do to experience stress is be alive. You have stressors at your job, you have stressors at home, you have things that you have to get. All of that causes stress. Children are sometimes stressed by their responsibility. So the things that they have to do, the homework assignments, the things that they have to do, sometimes will cause them stress. Sometimes the things that parents ask them to do or teachers ask them to do will cause them stress. Most children can handle that stress in a healthy manner, but a small percentage of children can't. And so those smaller percentage of children that have a very difficult time handling stress, then it causes them anxiety, and those are the kinds of children that will need to go see Dr. Thies.
Yes. Again, as I said, the way you asked, can you prevent it? It depends on the stage. For example, this is why you should see Dr. Rodriguez first, because sometimes we need to find out what's going on. If there is stress at home, marital conflict, father fighting all the time, or sickness, somebody very sick, grandparents very sick, or
worry.
Yeah,
a lot of
worry,
worry.
some financial problem, being homeless. Sometimes we don't think about it. We just, as adults, trying to deal with it. When the child is there and observing everything and getting in and can present as anxiety, okay? As you know, the part of the brain that control anxiety is the same that control depression. So sometimes you can know what producing it. As mentioned, those marital conflict, parental problem, you have somebody very sick in the house, and sexual abuse, physical abuse. So all these things, and being bullied in school, all these things can produce anxiety. So you need, first of all, to do a proper evaluation. So as I mentioned before, Dr. Rodriguez just said it, anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, many of those diagnoses are medical conditions. Sometimes you do need some medication in addition to the therapy to help you develop some skill, even the child, how to deal with the anxiety before getting to medication, how to breathe, how to move away, how to talk to the parents, and for the psychologists to see the parents, to see what the stressors are at home, to try to alleviate that. So until you do all this, you can try to prevent it. If it's still the medical part of it, you might need some medication.
And a certain amount of anxiety is normal in individuals. So, for example, as an adult, you might be sitting here and say, oh man, I gotta pay that bill, I gotta remember to do this. You know, all of those kinds of little worries that flood your head sometimes, well, that happens to children too. So a certain amount of anxiety is normal, just part of being alive. When it gets to be too much, and you start seeing negative symptoms arise up, a lot of children will experience tummy aches, or they can't go to sleep, so when it starts to affect their lives, then that's when you want to seek some, some expert, intervention to be able to help your child with that.
I think Dr. Rodriguez has done a good job explaining everything. Maybe this is why we don't have too many questions. I can believe we don't have questions in adolescent. I can believe this. Any question? Oh, okay. Oh, here first.
It's not a question, I just want you to translate me. O sea, me quedo con lo que él dice de que debemos intentar con la ansiedad en los niños, con todas las cosas que sabemos clínicamente, sintomáticamente, controlar respiración, los factores que están estresando y agotar todas esas instancias para recién pensar en medicarlo. ¿Eso me queda claro así?
Yes. So what he just said is there are other things that we can do. So things sort of like deep breathing, trying to control your thoughts, being able to counteract your thoughts. All of those kinds of things are things that we would want to try to do before we resort to medication. Sometimes we do both at the same time. Sometimes medication and doing those things are both most effective when they're done together. But it depends on every situation. Every situation is a little different.
Yes. He's bringing the microphone.
So thank you. So I have a quick question, just from a teacher lens. Some of my students, their outer school experience or those around them sometimes impact their motivation to succeed. Or whether maybe it's a divorce or the loss of a loved one, or maybe someone in their family told them they'll never succeed. How do you get through to encourage a child, regardless of the circumstance, to still pass the chapter, to still move ahead? Do you have any strategies to help unmotivated students who came to you that way based on something that was out of your hands?
So, research studies have shown that children who suffer from adverse circumstances in life, many examples have shown us that if there is just one adult in their life, one meaningful adult relationship that becomes a positive relationship in that child's life, that can make the difference between complete and utter life failure for that child or success. Children can sometimes go through terrible circumstances in life, but the good news is they are also resilient. And they just have to have one person that they make an emotional connection to, that they feel loves them, believes in them, and is willing to notice the positive things about them. Now, it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it takes a long time when somebody has a negative life outlook. And usually those negative life outlooks are rooted in very early in life. You know, between the ages of 0, when a child is first born, to the age of 2, a child establishes either a trust or mistrust orientation in life. How do they do that? If during those first 2 years of life, if a child's needs are met, if they encounter loving parents, if their world is safe, then that child will generally develop a trusting relationship with other people around them. But children, you know, that don't have that have had chaotic, you know, circumstances at the beginning of their life, will sometimes not be able to establish that. Now, the good news is that they can overcome that when they get into a situation where they can have a positive relationship. So, like Dr. Thies was saying, don't ever give up on a child. No matter how obnoxious they may appear to you, don't ever give up on them. Continuously point out that they are important, that they are worthwhile. I tell parents, if you have not ever told your child a message like this, I love you because you were born to me. I love you because you matter. If I could have picked anybody else in the world to be my son or my daughter, I would have picked you. Those words like that are words that feed children's souls. And they are the ties that will bind their hearts to yours. I've talked to many young adults that have told me, you know, when I was going through adolescence, the thing that stopped me from going crazy and from using drugs is I couldn't think that I could do that to my parents because I knew it would destroy them. Why did they do that? Because their hearts were bound to that parent. So how do you bind a child's heart that way? You constantly let them know that you are their biggest cheerleader, that you believe in them, and that even when they fail, you use it as a springboard to learn from and to keep going. You know, every child needs that kind of backing in order to be able to be the very best of themselves that they can be.
I think it's a very good, loaded question, your question here. Again, I remember when I was doing my training in New York, in Brooklyn, which is a very dangerous place, when we were dealing with psychiatric patients. So we had a very good social worker working with us, even though we are psychiatrists, we are doctors, we are very good social worker. Dr. Flamenhauer, I can never forget his name because they invite us to synagogue in Brooklyn. Yeah, so was a great teacher. Let me tell you, sometimes not only treating the patient in the hospital, sometimes you have to go to the house. Treat the whole family. Sometimes the child, sometimes the patient is not the patient. Sometimes the whole family is the patient. So I know you are the teacher, you are not a therapist. I think sometimes it's a good idea to open up to the family to see what's going on, to even though you don't want to do the therapy yourself, but to refer the whole family to the therapy to see how they can intervene, and that can have a significant impact on the child.
And one last thing. Sometimes I have talked with young people, young adolescents, who are experiencing chaotic home situations, and it makes them very depressed. And sometimes you can't change their chaotic home situation, but what you can do as the stable outside adult that they can make a connection with is you can give them hope. You can let them know at some point you're going to grow up. At some point you're going to go out and make your own home and find maybe a nice young man or a nice young lady and establish your own home, and then you will have more control about the things that you want to do with your life. So you can point them towards the future and give them a hope that will point them towards something outside of the circumstance that they may be in right now.
And again, as I said, even though the child is not presenting with any acute psychiatric symptoms, it would be a good idea to refer him, as the school in general, to refer some therapy. Maybe the therapist will try to intervene with the family and try to help. You don't have to wait to have some acute psychiatric symptoms before you can make a referral.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
I just have one. What advice would you provide parents or teachers that are not getting the results from children as quickly as they would like it? Like, for example, when it's regarding a behavior, that they're doing that, they wish for them to stop, and they're not stopping that behavior or doing that behavior that they want them to do as quickly as they would like them to.
If you're trying to get them to stop a behavior, I'm not sure I understood your question.
Basically, what advice would you provide parents or teachers that are trying to get children to stop a behavior?
Okay, so from my perspective as a psychologist, I always look at what is the function of the behavior. Behavior is purposeful. We don't just do things. Sometimes some people may do things and they don't know why, but usually behavior is purposeful. You do what you do for a reason. And sometimes we, in order to be able to stop certain behaviors, you have to look at why are they doing it? What is the function? What are they getting out of it? And when you have that answer, then you will have a little bit of a hint of how to be able to stop it. Sometimes when you have certain behaviors that are not productive, I work with a lot of kids or families that we have to say, okay, this behavior is not useful to you because it's not getting you what you want. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it is getting you what you want, and in some of those circumstances it can become a very negative reinforcing behavior. But you look at the function of it and you replace it with something that is more productive. I hope that's helpful to you.
As a psychiatrist, sometimes I like to be more concrete. First of all, I would like to know the age of the child. And second, sometimes you need to evaluate the child. As I said, many of those diagnoses that we talk about in adult, like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, many of us here deny that exists. It's real. So you might have a child who have ADHD, and no matter what you do, the child is not being treated. No matter what you do, it's going to be impossible for you to take care of that child. So that child might need to be evaluated. First of all, to know why the behavior is not changing. And second, even a child with depression, like I explained to you before, the adolescent with depression will misbehave, will act bizarre, will act strange, will provoke you in every step of the way just to get your attention because the child suffers from depression. So first of all, we need to evaluate the child and see if there is no underlying psychiatric diagnosis involved.
Yes, and so and what he's talking about is pathology. So there are certain children that have pathological conditions that need to be treated by medication and or therapy. But then there are other conditions that are not productive, that are not necessarily due to pathology, that are just due to life circumstances, and because children are learning that doing certain things gets them what they want. So that's where you have to go back to being able to say, what is the function of the behavior, so that we know, you know, what are they getting out of it, and then we either stop what they're getting out of it and change it to something that's more productive.
That's why I talk about the age, and also
Yes.
to have the child evaluated by psychologists, by psychiatrists. At least you can know what you're dealing with.
I like what you said about really looking at the function, because I did have a student who liked to get a lot of attention, and I realized that was the ultimate goal. His disruptions were attention seeking. So I gave him the attention in a different way. He started helping me pass out papers. If I needed something, he was always there. And so he got the attention in a different way. And by the end of the year, it went from him getting in
Yes.
trouble every day
Yes.
to
So,
him being one of my best.
and in that case, you turned it from a negative reinforcement into a positive reinforcement.
Correct.
So you allowed him to get the attention in a positive way rather than in a negative way.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so I have two questions. How does a parent or adults around children deal with the influence that social media has on the young minds? Because they believe social media and the influencers more than the adults around them. And then two, if I know of a child who's cutting themselves, their wrists, the parent is not helpful in, I guess they're in denial. Is that a sign of, what does that mean? And as a outside adult, is there anything that can be done?
Let me take the first question, and I'll refer the second question to Dr. Thies here. So as far as social media, research is telling us that social media is one of the greatest contributors to adolescent mental health deterioration. All of these, you know, Twitter and you know, all the things that kids post. And nowadays, it used to be that when you experienced bullying, before we had all the social media, you dreaded going to school because that's where you faced your bully, but at least at going home time, you could go home and you could be at peace. You know, now the bullying follows you. It follows you home because, you know, you're constantly logging in to see what people are saying about you, and that could be absolutely destructive. I tell parents, look, kids don't have the ability to get on social media unless you allow it. You know, who buys them the cell phone? You know, who allows them, you know, to create these accounts and so forth? If you are worried that the social media is having a deleterious effect or a negative effect on your child, that means they are not old enough to be able to handle it. And what would you do if it was something that was different? Well, you would take away the negative influence until they were older or wiser and wouldn't be believing everything that they were reading on there. You would remove them from the bully, okay? But if you're giving them the cell phone, it's like handing them the bully and say, go at it. You know, so sometimes I tell parents, you know, grow a backbone, because you have to make some tough choices sometimes. Don't give your child something that you think is harming them, and then be surprised when it's having, you know, a harmful effect on them. You can do something about that. You are in the driver's seat.
Could you repeat the second question for me, please?
Cutting behaviors.
It's a very good question. So, I came here in 1994, 3 years after I did my training, I finished my training in New York. I didn't remember seeing so many courting in New York. People used to say we have so much stress in New York. When I came to Florida, I don't know, because we have the sunshine all the time. I find even drug use and those courting are more prominent here than in New York. So maybe New York is high up to now, Yeah, courting. Courting could be a sign of depression. Could definitely be a sign of depression, sign of attention, and sometimes you might not even know it's a sign of depression because they don't even let you know. Sometimes we get adolescent kids admitted in the hospital with big cut in their legs, in their arms. So you ask them, did it hurt when you do it? They said, yes, it did, but I would rather have that pain than other pain.
Yes. So a lot of adolescents that engage in that behavior, it's because they are already in so much emotional pain that the way that young people have explained it to me is they feel a release. And so it can become an addictive behavior, just like alcohol or other drugs, because the sense of release that they feel when they cut becomes, over the course of time, it becomes addictive. So if you see a child that is engaging in that behavior, that is a child that needs to be in therapy. At that point, the parent isn't going to be qualified to be able to handle it. They need to seek the services of a professional to get at the root causes of what is causing, what kind of emotional pain. You have to fix the emotional pain first, and then deal with the cutting behavior. Because sometimes those types of situations, they're not necessarily suicidal. They're not doing it to kill themselves. Mm-hmm. They are doing it to soothe the emotional pain that they are in. And a lot of times, those kids that end up in the hospital, it's because they make a mistake and they will either cut too deep. They don't mean to hurt themselves that badly, but sometimes they cut too deep and then they can't stop the bleeding. So if you know of anybody that is experiencing that, that's very serious because of the addictive nature that it can become.
And one phrase they said all the time, why do you do that? This is self-harm. I want to self-harm. I want to self-harm myself. I want to, suffer.
Again, we live in a rather sick world, okay? And again, I shared with you this earlier, that is a sign that our Lord Jesus can't be far away. Because we literally have the power now to self-destruct. And in many ways, we are witnessing our society collapse in that, even the people who are in charge are allowing policies and so forth that put in place, things that are not helpful to children, things that will harm them. And yet these things are looked upon now as being valid. So it's our job as parents to be able to spot those things, to be able to say, wait a minute, okay, I need to put a stop to things that I know are going to be harmful to my child. Yes.
How can you handle your child when they come to you, they say they have a crush on someone?
When they have a crush on someone. Or when they have a crush on someone. Well, know that is normal. As you're growing up, it's a normal part of the growing up experience to be able to be attracted towards certain individuals and so forth. And I would say just be there for them. Because you know, if we remember when we were young and we were attracted to our first love interest, our first young man or our first young lady and so forth, and maybe that was reciprocated and maybe it wasn't. And if it wasn't, it sort of broke our hearts, okay? So be there for them so that you can walk them through, because generally your first love interest leads to heartache, at least at one point in time or another. So when they have a crush on somebody, those are natural occurring developments in life, and it usually wears itself out, you know, because the first person that you might have a crush in is not necessarily, most of the time, the person that you wind up marrying. So you will go through many, many such crushes in life, and that's okay. That's normal.
This is the last question because we have to, there's another program at 6:30, so we really have to.
Okay. How do you talk to kids about gay and lesbian relationships? More teens are participating in those exchanges. How do you navigate that and not seem like you're against gay people and all of that good stuff?
I want to say one thing. In our present day society, that philosophy is being glamorized at this point in time. It is being advertised. And just like anything else, kids are very tuned into modern day attitudes and society. Now, are there young people that are experiencing, you know, differences in who they are attracted to and who their sexual identity is? Absolutely. But I don't believe that it is to the point that our larger society is telling us that it is at this point in time, because it wasn't that way before. So how do you talk with them? You can let them know that during adolescence, that is a time where kids are questioning a lot of things. You know, I mentioned to you before that that's, you know, the primary task of adolescence is establishing an identity. A sexual identity goes right along with that same thing. So let kids know that it's okay to question, but that it's not a done deal, you know, which is why I think that it is ridiculous that our society is advocating sex change operation for children at this point in time, because children don't know yet. They haven't finalized. They don't have an identity yet at this point in time. And so to make life-altering decisions that are non-reversible at a time where you're still a kid is ludicrous. You know, to somebody that's been around as long as I've been around, that's ludicrous. So in answering your question, how do you talk with a child about that? Let them know that their feelings are their own, you know, that you can't change your feelings necessarily or who you are attracted to, but let them know that it is normal, under normal circumstances, to have some attraction to same-sex individuals in certain ways. So for example, if you're a girl, you might admire another girl because they do certain things well, or because you like how they dress, or you like how they look. That doesn't mean that you're gay, okay? So let them know that as they go through adolescence, they will experience a lot of different attractions, and that nothing is set in stone, because during this time, they will continue to develop, and as they grow older, those feelings or those thoughts will either become more pronounced or they will dissipate, you know. So the most important thing is establish those lines of communication and keep those lines of communication open. Do you have something to add?
I think Dr. Rodriguez said it very clear. I couldn't have said it any better. So the only thing I want to add is this: the same way we talk about the social media, about the world in general, the way they are presenting things, the way they are pushing those marijuana cards, those medical marijuana to us, the same way. We have to be very careful. That's another reason why we need to stick to our belief, we need to stick to our doctrine, we need to stick to what we believe in and let God do the work.
When in the world did we ever think that it would become popular to have all these lists of pronouns that everybody had to be defined by a pronoun of their choice? Our world has just gone crazy. It has gone crazy.
Very careful. Keep the kids in church. Let's keep church.
Absolutely.
Yes.
One more question.
In regards to her question, you mentioned that sometimes it will dissipate. What if it does not dissipate? How do you deal with it as Christian parents, especially Seventh-day Adventist parents?
So the way that I explain it to kids is none of us can help our feelings. God created us as emotional human beings, and we have feelings or different types of attractions to lots of different situations or lots of different individuals in life. But ultimately, what matters are our actions, okay? The only thing that we can do is put forth what is the biblical view. But say that no matter what, your child will always be your child. And that you will always love your child even if they make choices that you don't agree with.
Okay. All right, I think we have to close there. Round of applause to Rodriguez and Dr. Thies. Thank you so much. Both
These are tough topics, aren't they?
Yes. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here and to share the wealth of knowledge and information that you have. If there are any more questions, I don't know if you guys will stick around a bit if you want to ask, or if maybe someone wants to find out how they can talk to you some other way. You let me know and we can make some kind of arrangements as well. Both Dr. Thies and Sister Rodriguez work very closely with our school. As I said, Sister Rodriguez here sits on our school board. She visits from time to time, maybe almost every quarter, or at least twice per year. We also have a mental health counselor that works with our school for our students. We do have resources that we make available. Dr. Thies also works very closely with our school whenever there are situations that require medical attention. We usually start with Sister Rodriguez here and then end with Dr. Thies if it requires a more medical kind of approach to the situation. So I'm just letting you know that we do have those resources available. Thank you all once more for being here. A round of applause to our presenters once more, please. Let us stand and let us pray so that we can be dismissed. Let us pray. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for just being here today, the wealth of knowledge that was shared, the spirit with which it was shared, and I pray that you'll be with each and every person here, each person online, those who will watch this recording hereafter, and that you'll give them wisdom as they deal with the children in their lives, that you'll help them to always seek you, to recognize, Lord, that you are never taken by surprise, you're never taken off guard. Whatever situation or difficulty we may face, you always have a way that is provided, and I pray that you'll also help us to take advantage of the resources that you've made available to your church. We pray, Heavenly Father, that you will just be with us now. I pray especially that you'll be with our young people, our preteens, teens, those particularly at West Palm Beach Junior Academy, those in our church, those elsewhere, Lord, with whom we will interact and have influence. We pray that you will be with them. As has been shared, we believe that Jesus is coming very soon, hence the intensity with which the devil is attacking. But we know that, Lord, you've promised that when the enemy comes in like a flood, you'll raise up a standard. And we thank you for that promise, and we claim that now, and just ask that you help us to keep our eyes open to the resources and the means that you provide for us to counteract the enemy. We thank you once more for this evening, and just continue to be with us, we pray. Grant journeying mercies and protection in this untried and new week. In Jesus' name we've prayed.